Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
So today we're tackling a case that kind of reminds us that you can't always judge a book by its cover.
Definitely not.
And even the most picture-perfect families, those families that seem to have it all together, can be hiding some seriously dark secrets.
Absolutely.
And that's definitely the case with the story of Tim McNeel, a successful, defense attorney, seemed to have a good life, who was tragically murdered in his own home back in 2007.
Terrible case.
And the prime suspects in his murder were none other than his own stepchildren.
Hard to believe.
Bray Hansen and Nathan Gan.
Yeah, it's a case that really makes you think, on the surface, it seems like a typical blended family loving father.
Right, got it all.
Stepdaughter.
Perfect.
But when you start peeling back the layers, you uncover this really twisted story of lies, betrayal, and ultimately a cold-blooded murder.
Yeah, absolutely. And the details of this case are pretty shocking.
Yeah.
So, McNeel was found shot to death in his home on July 19th, 2007.
Right.
His stepdaughter, Bray, was found bound nearby, and she claimed that a masked intruder had broken in and committed the crime.
Typical, right.
But the police, they started noticing some holes in Bray's story right from the beginning.
Oh, yeah, right off the bat, that 911 call was a big red flag.
What was wrong with the 911 call?
Well, Bray described the intruder's voice as sounding like a cartoon character, which,
A little strange.
it's not something you hear every day, right? And then later in the call, she accidentally refers to the intruder as Nathan.
Whoa, wait a minute. Nathan, as in her stepbrother.
Exactly.
Was he actually at the scene of the crime?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, right? The police, they found a discarded ski mask at the scene.
Oh.
And they ran some DNA tests, and guess whose DNA was on it?
Nathan's.
Nathan's.
Wow.
Plus, they had multiple eyewitnesses who reported seeing a man matching Nathan's description running away from McNeel's house that night.
Okay, so we've got two step-siblings, a murdered stepfather, and a whole lot of suspicious circumstances.
Yep, all the ingredients for a juicy case.
So what happened when the police brought Bray and Nathan in for questioning?
Oh, that's when the real drama started.
Okay.
They basically engaged in this back-and-forth blame game.
Oh, boy.
Each one accusing the other of being the mastermind behind this whole murder plot.
Oh, wow.
So Bray, she initially claims that Nathan acted alone, but then she completely changes her story and gives this incredibly detailed confession.
Okay.
She describes how they considered all these different ways to kill McNeel.
Like what?
Like poisoning him, beating him, even hiring a hitman.
Wow, they really thought this through.
Yeah, it was pretty elaborate.
Wow.
But eventually they settled on using McNeel's own gun.
Okay.
And Bray claims that she wanted to back out, but Nathan threatened her.
Convenient.
Right.
Yeah.
What about Nathan? What was his side of the story?
Yeah, what did he have to say?
Well, Nathan, at first, he denies any involvement at all. But then he admits to being at the house during the murder.
Okay.
And then he finally confesses to actually being the one who pulled the trigger.
Oh, wow.
He says that Bray manipulated him into doing it and that he was driven by this, this need for recognition, for attention.
Okay.
But here's the thing that really got to me.
What's that?
Throughout her entire confession, Bray, she displayed this almost unsettling lack of remorse.
Really?
It was like she was talking about, what she had for breakfast, not confessing to helping orchestrate a murder.
Yeah, that's chilling.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder, what could drive two young people to commit such a horrific act?
Right.
Was there anything in their past, any hints of this darkness that was to come?
Well, to really understand their motivations, we have to take a closer look at their family history. And trust me, it's a complicated one.
All right, so let's unpack this family dynamic a little bit.
Okay.
What can you tell us about Bray and Nathan's childhood and the events that led up to this murder?
Well, both Bray and Nathan had a really tough upbringing.
Okay.
Their mother, Bray Hansen, struggled with alcoholism and depression.
Oh, that's tough.
And there were reports of abuse towards both of the kids.
Really?
To try and escape the turmoil at home, Nathan actually went to live with his grandmother when he was just 12 years old.
Oh, wow. That's young
Yeah.
to have to leave your family like that.
Yeah, it was a difficult situation all around.
Right.
And then in 2006, tragedy struck again when Doreen, their mother, committed suicide.
Oh, gosh. That's awful.
So you can imagine this was a lot for these kids to deal with.
Absolutely.
Losing their mother like that on top of everything else they had been through.
Yeah, unimaginable.
It was a really difficult time.
So where did Tim McNeel, their stepfather, fit into all of this?
Right.
Was there any tension between him and the kids?
Well, despite all the family drama, McNeel actually seemed to have a genuinely good relationship with both of his stepchildren. Especially with Bray, she even called him Dad. It seemed like he was trying his best to provide a stable and loving home for them.
That's good. At least there was that.
Yeah, it seemed like he was really trying to be a positive force in their lives.
So from the outside looking in, it seemed like a pretty loving, father-daughter relationship.
Right.
Were there any underlying issues, anything that might have contributed to this tragedy?
Well, there was another wrinkle in this whole family situation.
Oh.
McNeel had recently started dating a woman named Kim.
Okay.
And some people have speculated that Bray, who was already dealing with the loss of her mother and all the other upheaval in her life,
Right.
became really jealous and resentful of Kim.
I can see that.
She might have seen Kim as a threat to the bond that she had with McNeel.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's another layer to this whole story.
So we've got a deeply troubled family, a possible motive for the murder.
Yeah.
And two very different accounts of what happened that night.
Exactly.
This case is already so complex, and we haven't even gotten to the trials yet.
Oh, just wait. It gets even more complicated.
I bet it does.
It's a real roller coaster ride.
I'm already hooked.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear what happened next.
We'll dive into all that after the break.
All right, so where we left off, Bray and Nathan are pointing fingers at each other.
Right, it's a real mess.
A family full of secrets and lies, and a trial that's about to begin.
Absolutely.
What happened when these cases finally went to court?
Well, remember, these were separate trials.
Oh, right.
Which just added another layer of complexity to this whole thing.
Yeah, I bet.
And as you can imagine, both cases were anything but straightforward.
With all those conflicting stories, all that trauma, the prosecution must have had a really hard time.
They did. They faced a major setback right from the start with Nathan's trial.
Oh, why is that?
Remember that confession he gave where he admitted to shooting McNeel?
Yeah, the one where he claimed Bray manipulated him?
Right. Well, that confession, it was ruled inadmissible in court.
What?
Issues with his Miranda rights.
Oh, right.
The police messed up.
Oh, well.
They didn't properly inform him of his right to remain silent, his right to an attorney.
So even though he confessed, the jury never even got to hear about it?
Nope. It was a huge blow to the prosecution's case.
I bet.
Without that confession, it was much harder to prove Nathan's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, I can see that.
But, the prosecution wasn't the only one facing challenges.
Oh, really?
The defense teams for both Bray and Nathan, they had some pretty interesting strategies.
I bet. What did they do? What about Bray? I mean, she admitted to planning the murder?
Right. Well, her attorney took a really risky but calculated approach.
Okay.
He acknowledged her involvement in the plot,
All right.
but argued that she tried to back out at the last minute,
Okay.
essentially throwing Nathan under the bus,
Wow.
making him out to be the sole aggressor.
So sibling rivalry on a whole other level.
For sure.
And Nathan's defense team, what did they do?
They focused on discrediting the prosecution's star witness. This guy was a convicted drug dealer who claimed that Nathan confessed to him while they were in jail together.
Okay.
So the defense argued that this guy was unreliable,
Oh, right.
that his testimony couldn't be trusted.
So both sides were trying to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury?
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Create enough doubt, and you might just get your client off.
Were there any other surprises during the trials?
Oh, absolutely.
Like what?
Just when you thought things couldn't get any more complicated.
Yeah.
Nathan's ex-girlfriend took the stand.
Oh, no.
And she alleged that he had been sexually abusive towards her.
Whoa, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Was that a real claim or just a tactic to discredit Nathan even further?
That's a question that a lot of people still debate.
Yeah, I bet.
Some believe it was a desperate attempt to make Nathan look bad.
Right.
Others think her claims were legitimate.
Right.
And should have been handled as a separate issue from the murder case.
Yeah, I could see both sides.
Either way, it added another layer of complexity to this already convoluted trial.
We keep coming back to Bray's lack of remorse.
Right.
And you mentioned she wrote that letter the night she was arrested.
I did.
What did it say?
Well, that letter was pretty damning evidence.
I bet.
She detailed her plans to kill McNeel.
Really?
And there was absolutely no remorse.
Oh.
Cold, calculating, and just very matter of fact.
Wow.
The prosecution used it to paint her as the mastermind.
Oh, yeah.
The one who orchestrated the whole thing.
Yeah, that's not good.
Not good for her defense at all.
It does make it sound like she was the driving force behind this whole thing.
It does.
So what was the verdict?
Well, the jury found Nathan guilty of first-degree murder.
Oh.
And they sentenced him to 25 years to life in prison.
It's a long time.
It is.
What about Bray?
Bray received a harsher sentence, first-degree murder, with the special circumstance of lying in wait.
Right.
Life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Wow, so they both got life sentences.
They did.
But Bray's is without any chance of getting out.
That's right.
How did they react when they heard the verdicts?
Their reactions were pretty interesting.
Okay.
Bray, she actually requested that Nathan remain in prison.
Really?
Yeah, she said she feared for her safety if
Wow.
he were ever released.
That's crazy.
And Nathan, he maintains his innocence to this day,
Still.
insists that Bray manipulated him.
Wow, so even after being convicted, they're still blaming each other.
It's hard to let go, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
Especially when you're facing a life sentence.
This case really shows just how complex family dynamics can be.
It does.
Especially when you throw in childhood trauma, resentment, a power struggle between siblings.
Absolutely.
And it also shows that justice isn't always black and white.
Nope, there are definitely shades of gray in this story.
Yeah, and even after the trials, there's still so many unanswered questions.
That's the thing about these kinds of cases. They stick with you, they make you think.
They do. It's really wild how this whole thing just plays out like some psychological thriller.
Yeah, it really does.
You've got this family torn apart by tragedy, the conflicting confessions, and ultimately two young lives that are changed forever by their actions.
You know,
It's hard to even imagine the level of betrayal and manipulation that happened within this family.
definitely. And even though the trials are over and the verdicts are in, there are still so many questions left unanswered.
That's right. Like, how much influence did Bray actually have over Nathan?
Right.
Was she this mastermind that the prosecution made her out to be?
It's a puzzle that we might never fully solve.
Probably not.
But, the jury ultimately found Bray more culpable, especially with that whole lying in wait element, which suggests a level of premeditation.
Yeah.
That's really chilling.
It is.
But trying to understand the complexities of their relationship and what drove them to do this, that's something we may never fully comprehend.
It's like we're left with two separate tragedies. The loss of Tim McNeel's life and then the destruction of these two young people's lives.
Right.
It really makes you think about those ripple effects of trauma, how the pain and instability of their childhood could have contributed to this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. This case is a stark reminder of how deeply childhood trauma can impact a person, and how destructive things like anger and resentment can be when they're left unchecked.
Exactly.
You see how this cycle of abuse and neglect can just create a breeding ground for violence and despair.
It also brings up some tough questions about accountability.
For sure.
Can someone who's gone through so much hardship be held fully responsible for their actions?
It's a valid question.
Especially if they're being influenced by someone else.
Exactly.
Where do we even begin to draw that line between victim and perpetrator?
That's a question that philosophers have been grappling with for centuries.
Yeah.
And this case definitely doesn't provide any easy answers.
No.
But it does force us to confront those difficult questions.
Yeah.
To recognize that sometimes the line between good and evil can be incredibly blurred.
He can.
It's easy to get caught up in the legal aspects of a case like this.
It is.
But we have to remember the human element.
Of course.
A man lost his life, a family was shattered, and two young people are now spending their lives behind bars.
It's a tragedy on multiple levels.
It really is.
And it serves as a reminder of just how fragile life is.
It does.
And the devastating consequences that can come from unresolved pain and anger.
Yeah, it makes you think about the importance of intervention.
Yeah.
Were there missed opportunities along the way?
Right.
Could something have been done to address the trauma and dysfunction in this family before it reached this point?
Before it escalated.
Exactly.
It's a haunting question, for sure.
It is.
It leaves us with a sense of, unease, but also a sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
We need to be more aware of those signs of trauma and abuse in our own communities, in our own families.
We do.
And be willing to step in to offer support before it's too late.
Absolutely. This case shows that we all have a role to play in creating a safer, more compassionate world.
We do.
A world where families can heal and tragedies like this become less frequent.
I hope so.
It starts with recognizing the signs, offering support, and breaking those cycles of pain that can lead to such terrible outcomes.
Well said. This has been a really insightful deep dive.
I think so too.
Thank you for sharing your expertise and helping us unpack this complicated and disturbing case.
It's been my pleasure.
It's a story that'll definitely stay with us.
I think so.
And it reminds us how important empathy, understanding, and proactive intervention are.
Very important.
In our own lives and our communities.
Could not agree more.
So for everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.
We'll see you on the next one.